They said he was the strongest billionaire in the city, a man whose words could move presidents, whose money could buy silence, whose power could crush anyone who stood in his way. But on a cold, rainy night, he lay half dead beside a dirty gutter, his blood mixing with the mud, his expensive suit torn like paper, and not a single friend came to save him. Everyone walked past. Everyone, except one man, a beggar so weak that even the wind could push him down, a man whose bones could be counted, whose voice trembled when he spoke. That beggar, the weakest in town, lifted the dying billionaire with shaking hands, not knowing that saving him would change both their destinies forever. This is not just a story about wealth or weakness. It's a story about the night power bowed before humility. They said Darian Cole was untouchable, the strongest billionaire in a lemur, a man who built towers where slums once stood, whose signature could turn dust into diamonds, and whose voice echoed like thunder in boardrooms across nations. But that evening, power failed him, and for the first time, the city that once bowed before him walked past him. The rain began as a whisper, then became a roar. The sky over a lemur was dark and heavy, a wild orchestra of thunder and lightning dancing across glass towers. Inside one of those towers, 50 floors high, Darian Cole stood before a wide window, staring at the reflection of his own empire. He had just closed a deal worth hundreds of millions. The world would call it victory. But inside him, there was silence, the kind that eats you from the inside. His secretary's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Sir, your car is ready." Darian turned slowly. "Cancel the dinner with the governor. I want to drive myself tonight." The secretary hesitated. "Alone, sir." He nodded. "Yes, alone." Minutes later, the billionaire stepped into the storm. His black Rolls-Royce glided through the wet roads like a shadow. City lights blurred on the windshield. Red, gold, blue, the colors of success fading into rain. He had been called many names: ruthless, brilliant, unstoppable, but never kind, and that word haunted him more than any failure could. He remembered his father, a poor schoolteacher who died of an illness Darian was too busy to visit him through. He remembered the tears of a woman he once loved but abandoned for ambition. He remembered the faces of workers who begged for raises while he signed checks for politicians. As he drove deeper into the night, a small thought whispered through his mind. What if all this power disappears tomorrow? He never knew the answer would come within the next few minutes. The first gunshot shattered his windshield. He swerved. Tires screamed. Another bullet. The car spun out of control, hit the guardrail, and flipped into a ditch. Then silence. Darian lay upside down, trapped between metal and glass. His chest burned. His leg bled. The smell of petrol mixed with the rain. Somewhere in the distance, he heard his bodyguards' voices fade. Then gunshots again. Then nothing. He tried to reach for his phone, but his fingers were slick with blood. He pressed the screen. It cracked. No signal. The rain grew louder, merciless, washing his face and the blood on his suit. His breath came in gasps. He looked at the road above, where shadows of people passed by. He tried to call out, "Help, somebody help." A woman glanced down, saw the broken car, gasped, and walked away. A motorcyclist slowed down, looked once, and sped off into the storm. No one stopped. The strongest billionaire was now just another broken man in the gutter of the same city he built. And the irony? He had built hospitals, yet none could save him that night. He had funded police stations, yet no officer came. He had thousands of employees, yet not one was there when he needed help the most. He coughed weakly, his vision blurring. His mind began to drift between memories and reality. He saw flashes of his office, the gold award on his desk, the endless clapping of people who only came for contracts. He whispered to the wind, "So this is how power ends quietly." And then, through the rain, he heard footsteps, weak, dragging. A shadow appeared, thin, limping, hunched under a torn umbrella. A man in tattered clothes, barefoot, clutching a cracked plastic bowl. He stopped when he saw the wreck. "Jesu," he whispered, dropping his bowl. He staggered closer. eyes wide in disbelief. The headlights flickered, revealing his gaunt face, dark skin, deep eyes filled with fear and compassion. It was Afani, the beggar who usually sat outside Darienne's own skyscraper every morning, begging for coins from the same people who served the billionaire. He knelt beside the wreck. "Sir, can you hear me?" Darienne's lips trembled. "Help me." Afani panicked. "Oh Lord, I don't even have phone." He looked around helplessly. No car stopped. He pressed his hands against Darienne's wound to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me. Sir, please. I'll find help." But the rain was relentless. And in that moment, the beggar realized help wasn't coming. He looked at the billionaire's face, pale, weak, barely conscious, and made a decision. He tore his own shirt into strips, tied them around the wound, then pushed and pulled the heavy door until it creaked open. His arms shook. His back screamed in pain. But somehow, with every ounce of strength he had left, he lifted Darienne onto his shoulder. The man everyone called the weakest beggar in town carried the strongest billionaire through the rain that night. Step by step, he dragged him toward the narrow street behind the warehouses. His bare feet slipped on mud, his knees scraped against stones, but he kept whispering, "You'll live, sir. You'll live by God's mercy." Every few meters, he stopped to breathe, coughing, trembling. The billionaire's weight was crushing, but the beggar's was heavier. He had known hunger, rejection, and shame, but never before had he carried the life of another man in his arms. When he finally reached his tiny wooden shelter, Ifani laid Darienne on the floor, gasping for air. He lit a candle, the flame shaking in the breeze. The billionaire's eyes fluttered open. He stared at the roof, leaking water, at the smell of smoke and rust, at the ragged man kneeling beside him. And for a long time, he said nothing. Only his eyes moved, eyes that had seen the world from penthouses and private jets, now staring at the kindness of a man with nothing. The beggar gently placed his hand on Darienne's chest. "Don't worry, sir. You'll be fine. You're safe now." Outside, thunder rolled again. Inside, for the first time in years, Darienne Cole, the man who never bowed to anyone, closed his eyes and let a tear roll down. Because that night, he realized something money could never teach him. When life strips you bare, the hands that lift you are often the ones you once ignored. And somewhere, as the rain continued to pour, the city slept, unaware that its strongest man had just been saved by its weakest soul. That night, a beggar carried a billionaire. But in truth, it was the billionaire's soul that was carried. From arrogance into gratitude, from power into peace. And though neither of them knew it yet, their paths would cross again soon. This time, not as beggar and billionaire, but as brothers tied by mercy. The world thought he had died, but he came back, not as the man who left the tower that night, but as a soul reborn by mercy. The strongest billionaire had seen weakness, and now he could never see the world the same again. When Darienne Cole stepped back into the world of wealth, he was unrecognizable. The newspapers screamed, "Billionaire found alive." TV stations replayed his face on every channel. Bodyguards stood at attention, and shareholders flooded his mansion with flowers and relief. But inside him, there was silence. He didn't smile at the cameras. He didn't thank the reporters. Because while everyone celebrated his life, all he could think about was the man who gave it back to him. Ifani, the beggar. The man with trembling hands and an unbreakable heart. Doctors patched his wounds. Reporters sought interviews. And business partners planned a triumphant return to power dinner. But Darienne wasn't listening. He sat by the hospital window every night, staring at the city lights flickering below. He thought about the shack, the leaking roof, the pot of watery rice, the man who smiled through hunger. He remembered the words, "Promise me one thing. When you walk again, help someone who can't." Those words echoed louder than any boardroom applause ever did. One morning, Darienne asked his driver, "Take me to the old part of Alimur, the warehouse district." The man looked confused. "Sir, that's not safe." Darienne interrupted. "Neither is living without gratitude." The car rolled through narrow streets he had never seen before. Rusty gates, half-collapsed buildings, children running barefoot through puddles. Everywhere he looked, he saw lives untouched by his empire. He finally told the driver to stop beside a dusty road. "Here, I'll walk from here." He stepped out, dressed in a simple shirt and jeans. No suit, no guards, no arrogance. As he walked through the alleys, faces turned toward him with suspicion. He asked everyone he met the same question. "Do you know a man named Afani?" He used to stay near the warehouse, thin, gentle, always helping others. Some shrugged. Some ignored him. Some said, "Many beggars live here, Oga. How will you find just one?" But Darien kept walking. Hours passed. His shoes were covered in dust, his voice tired from asking. Then an old woman selling roasted corn looked up at him and said, "Afani? You mean the one who always gave his own food to children?" Darien's heart leapt. "Yes. Where is he?" She pointed toward a narrow alley. "He hasn't been well. He coughs every night now. Poor man barely eats. He lives behind that broken wall." Darien ran. He turned the corner and stopped. There, lying on a worn-out mat beside an old tin basin, was Afani. His body was thinner than before, his face pale. He coughed so hard that his ribs shook. Beside him sat a small bowl with a few coins and a half-eaten piece of bread. Darien froze. Tears filled his eyes. He walked closer, slowly, afraid the man might not recognize him. But Afani smiled weakly the moment their eyes met. "Sir, I knew you'd come," he whispered, voice trembling. Darien knelt beside him. You kept me alive, Afani. I searched everywhere." The beggar laughed softly. "You didn't have to. You're a big man now. People like me disappear." Darien shook his head. "Not to me. Never again." He placed his hand on Afani's shoulder. "I made a promise, remember? You said when I walk again, I should help someone who can't. Well, I came to start with you." Afani coughed again, his eyes glistening. "Sir, you owe me nothing. God used me, that's all." Darien took off his wristwatch, the same cracked one that had survived the crash, and placed it in the beggar's hand. "This watch reminds me of that night. I nearly lost everything. Keep it, because you remind me that life is more than time. It's what we do with it." Afani stared at it, tears welling up. "No one ever gave me anything, sir, except leftovers. This is too much." Darien smiled sadly. "No, my friend. You gave me something too, my second chance." By evening, Darien brought a team of doctors. They treated Afani, cleaned his wounds, and carried him carefully into a waiting black SUV. The same streets that once saw a beggar crawling now saw him leaving with the richest man in the city. Some people clapped. Some whispered in disbelief. But Afani, weak as he was, smiled through the window. The city that once ignored him finally looked. That night, inside Darien's mansion, everything was silent again, except for the sound of healing. Afani lay on a clean bed for the first time in years. The soft sheets felt unreal. He turned to Darien, who sat nearby, watching him. "I don't belong here," Afani said softly. Darien replied, "You belong where grace found you." The beggar smiled. "Then maybe grace is richer than money." Darien chuckled quietly. "I think you're right." Weeks passed. Afani grew stronger. The mansion's staff adored him. The man who thanked everyone for everything, who prayed before every meal, who told stories about hope in the streets. But Darien knew his friend wanted more than luxury. He wanted purpose. So one morning, Darien called him to the study. "Afani," he said, "I'm launching a foundation, one that feeds the poor, shelters the homeless, and teaches the forgotten. And I want you to lead it." Afani froze. "Me? Let it?" "Sir, I can barely read. I don't belong behind a desk." Darien smiled. "I don't need your handwriting. I need your heart. That's the one thing this world can't buy." The beggar's eyes filled with tears. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Then just say yes." Afani nodded, weeping. And in that quiet, holy moment, a billionaire knelt and hugged a man the world once called nothing. The papers would later call it the miracle of a lemur. But to Darien and Afani, it wasn't a miracle, it was justice. Because in a world obsessed with power, they had found something stronger, mercy. That night, as the city lights shimmered again, the richest man in town whispered a silent prayer of thanks. Not for money, not for fame, but for the weakest man who had once lifted him from the mud. Once upon a city's heart stood two men, one the richest in gold, the other the richest in grace. And that day, under the weight of cameras and eyes, the world finally learned which wealth lasts forever. The Grand Hall of Coal Industries had never seen such a crowd. Every chandelier blazed like daylight. Every seat shimmered with power. Governors, ambassadors, media tycoons, CEOs, men and women who shaped the nation. It was supposed to be the billionaire's return of power ceremony. But Darian Cole had planned something none of them expected. He stood backstage in a black suit, calm but heavy with emotion. Beside him was Afani, the once-forgotten beggar, now dressed in a simple white agbada that Darian himself had bought for him. He looked nervous, almost trembling. Darian placed a hand on his shoulder. "You once carried me when I couldn't walk. Let me carry you into the world today." Afani swallowed hard. "Sir, I'm not ready for this crowd." Darian smiled. "Neither was I the day I fell from the sky." When they stepped onto the stage, the hall went silent. Reporters held their breath. Cameras clicked rapidly. Darian walked slowly to the microphone. His voice, once proud and sharp, now carried the warmth of humility. "My friends, my colleagues, my family. The man standing beside me is not my employee, not my charity case, and not my project. He is my savior." Gasps filled the room. Murmurs swept through the audience. Darian continued. "The night my jet crashed, I was dying. I didn't see bodyguards. I didn't see luxury. I saw one man, a stranger, who gave me his own breath, his own food, his own life. His name is Afani." He turned to him. The camera zoomed in on Afani's tear-streaked face. "While I was lost in pain, he found me. And when I forgot how to live, he reminded me why." A single tear rolled down Darian's cheek. The room was silent, the kind of silence that humbles even pride. He gestured toward the massive projector screen behind them. It lit up with the title, "The Foundation of Grace." Darian spoke again. "Today, we launch a movement. A home for the forgotten, a voice for the voiceless, a table where every hungry man will eat. I may fund it with my money, but it will be led by the man who fed me when I had none. Mr. Afani." The entire hall erupted. Some stood in disbelief. Some wept openly. Even the powerful bowed their heads in respect. Darian turned to Afani. "Please, my friend, say something." Afani froze, trembling under the light. His voice cracked as he spoke into the microphone. "I'm not a man of speeches. I'm just a man who believes that life is bigger than what we hold. The day I found Mr. Darian, I didn't see a billionaire. I saw a man who needed help. I didn't know saving him would change my life. But maybe that's what love does. It changes both the giver and the receiver." He paused. "I have slept under bridges, begged on streets, and been ignored by hundreds of rich men. But today, I stand before you because one rich man decided to remember what it means to be human. So please, don't wait until someone saves you before you learn to save others." The hall was silent again. Then came the sound, gentle at first, then roaring, applause, standing ovation, tears. Men in suits clapped until their hands hurt. Women wept openly. The governor wiped his eyes. Darian stepped forward and embraced Afani. Two men, one once called the strongest, the other the weakest, held each other as equals. The mansion balcony glowed under moonlight. The wind was calm, the city quiet. Darian and Afani sat side by side, watching the stars. "Do you realize," Darian said softly, "you've become the face of hope for millions?" Afani chuckled. "I don't want to be a face. I just want to feed people." Darian smiled. "That's why you're perfect for it." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Afani turned and said, "Sir, you've taught me something too." Darian raised a brow. "What's that?" Afani replied, "That power without kindness is poverty." The billionaire stared at him, eyes misty. Then we're both rich now. They laughed quietly. And so the story that began with a crash ended with a rising. Not the rising of planes, or stock prices, or empires, but the rising of hearts. The beggar who was once invisible became the light that guided a nation. And the billionaire who once ruled cities learned how to rule himself. Because life, in the end, is not about what you own. It's about what you give. A line of children eating hot meals under a tent marked the foundation of grace. Volunteers laugh. Music plays softly, and a mural shows Darien and Afani shaking hands. Above it are the words, "True strength is not how high you stand, but how many you lift." Moral lesson. In every rich man lies a poor heart waiting to be healed. And in every poor man lies a treasure waiting to be seen. Don't measure people by what they have. Measure them by what they give. Because sometimes the weakest hand holds the strongest soul. If this story touched your heart, don't scroll away. Hit the like button, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs hope today. Because kindness is the only currency that never loses value. Yellow Heart.